right, well, here we go. So just my one piece on Ulta. So Ulta Beauty is a Chicagoland based retailer. We're been in operation for I believe it's 27 years right now. Our headquarters is based out in Bolingbrook, Illinois, and then we also have an office right across from Union Station in Chicago. We have over 1,200 stores across the country. We're in all 50 states. 90% of our stores are off mall stores, so not stores that are within malls. Most of them are not pure like downtown urban environments. We do have quite a few stores in downtown Chicago as well as Manhattan and New York City and some other areas, but a lot of our stores are kind of in your close to downtown, more suburban areas. We have 45,000 employees across the country. That's including store team members. Our corporate office presence is about 1,500 employees across all the different teams that make up the retail enterprise. 25,000 different products that are on average in a given store, over 500 brands, really catering to all things beauty, all in one place, whether that be our physical stores or our Ulta.com and native app experiences. And then another unique element is just we have a full service salon in every one of our stores, so you could get haircuts, hair colors, hairstyles in every store. There's skin bars in a majority of store, brow services in a majority of store, as well as makeup services. So a little bit of a differentiated offering as it relates to the competition that is out there, but definitely a growing company. Been growing, continue to grow as far as Chicagoland. Employers, definitely one that's been growing over the past 5 to 10 years for sure. So now I'm going to get a bit into my journey, kind of where I've gone, kind of since the high school days. So starting off, kind of grew up in the western suburbs of Chicago. Went to Addison Trail High School in Addison. For context, just to give you a rough idea, graduated in 1997 from Addison Trail, and then from there went to college at Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. So far enough away that I was on my own, but close enough with like a little bit over a 2-hour drive where it was easy to make it back home if need be, but definitely still kind of in some ways a world away from high school and from where I grew up. At Purdue, I studied what they called management, or essentially a lot of colleges will call business administration, but majored in management and minored in management information systems at Purdue. Then kind of going into my senior year, had the opportunity to early in the fall, kind of during the fall recruitment cycle, get offered a position at Arthur Andersen, which was a global company, but headquartered in Chicago, was in the technology consulting space, and kind of at the time in the late 90s was one of the preeminent kind of destinations for college graduates. It was definitely a well-regarded company, a well-established company, and was a place among other kind of consulting companies that a lot of new graduates would gravitate to. Unfortunately, a few things happened. So even though I signed to start work with Arthur Andersen during my senior year of college, I actually never worked one day at Arthur Andersen. Few things happened. So there was the Enron scandal of the late 90s, of which Arthur Andersen was the lead auditor for the Enron company. So Arthur Andersen itself ended up essentially imploding in easiest terms. There was also the 9/11, obviously, incident that impacted everything across the country, and essentially was never able to start at Arthur Andersen, and through a series of delays over the course of about a year, eventually agreed to kind of cut ties with pursuing an opportunity with them. And then this is where the zig really starts for me. I ended up having to go back, and a year after college graduation was working at the Italian deli in Addison that I worked at in high school. So obviously not the plan that I had, kind of, coming out of Purdue and having a job and feeling like I was on my way, and then crazy things happen, and now I'm slicing salami and making Italian subs at my high school employer. So definitely not where I wanted to be or thought I would be. From then I ended up going into another non-glamorous role, and I worked at an auto body collision center where I basically helped to manage kind of their front office as well as handle all of their auto parts kind of inventory and auto parts returns. So definitely also not where I thought I would be, a year or so earlier as I was getting close to graduating from Purdue. But then after about a year or so, of doing kind of these odd jobs, and really right before that following year of students kind of graduated, got back into what I would say a more traditional working world company approach, and took a position at a company called Career Education Corporation. They were based out in Schaumburg. They run they have hundreds of what I would call for-profit college institutions, so culinary schools, technical trade schools, other schools that exist out there, and this was kind of the central company. I ended up getting a job as a financial analyst, and I was not a finance major. Didn't really focus on finance, but I had a couple classes of finance in college, and was able to talk well enough during the interview process that they decided to bring me in as a financial analyst. So it wasn't a perfect fit, but in my mind, it was actually finally getting more into the working kind of business world. So at least it was a start for me. From career education, I ended up moving to a company called Protiviti. Protiviti was ironically at Arthur Andersen. I was supposed to actually start working in their technology risk consulting group. And that particular group, when Arthur Andersen imploded, the partners that led up that group formed this new company called Protiviti. And some of the kind of friends of mine that were supposed to be in my start class, a few of them did start at Andersen and ended up making over to this new company, Protiviti. So in my mind, it was kind of a full circle, kind of getting back to what I thought I was going to do coming out of college. So I decided to leave Career Ed and move over to Protiviti. But after about 2 years, I decided, the world of auditing wasn't really for me. Kind of the pure consulting lifestyle, as glamorous as it was early on, kind of started to wear quickly. So then decided to move from Protiviti to Harris Bank, now known as BMO Harris Bank here in the area. Ironically, the two companies were across the street from one another. So I literally went from one corner of LaSalle and Monroe in Chicago to literally across the street to where Harris was and where still is based. This is also where I started my first of what I called multi-life-changing moments at once. So I actually quit Protiviti and got married at the same time. So it was kind of a movie script where basically gave my notice at Protiviti, did my last day, took 2 weeks off, got married, went on a honeymoon, and then came back and started a new job. So it worked out nicely from that perspective. After a couple of years at Harris, ended up moving to a company called Metro Mix, which in the this would be like the mid 2000s, so like 2000, kind of actually late 2000s, like around 2006, 7, 8 era. Metro Mix, both in Chicago as well as in most of the country, was kind of the Yelp before there was the Yelp, and Foursquare before there was Foursquare. So really the preeminent source of restaurant and entertainment information, not only in Chicago, but in a lot of other places. So at the time, it was kind of a perfect mix of getting more into kind of my first digital product role, but also being kind of as topically, in an area that was of personal interest to me. So it was kind of the best of both worlds, and was a really great team, that I worked with, and still stay in touch with a lot of the colleagues I had at Metro Mix, and was a super young, energetic office. And a lot of folks have, Metro Mix has kind of gone by the wayside now, but a lot of folks that I worked with there have gone on to great things at other companies and founded startups and a lot of different things. So it's definitely cool to see where we've all ended up after the Metro Mix days. So kind of leading up to Metro Mix, I had a lot of, I would say, like 2-year kind of career stops. So it wasn't definitely wasn't by intention to kind of be going from job to job to job. It was kind of just what happened for various reasons, kind of between the time that I went to career education, kind of through the Metro Mix days. But then when Metro Mix was kind of going through an acquisition process and it seemed like things were uncertain, decided to make a move and end up going to Walgreens, which was, not only a a huge, Chicagoland-based company, but had been someone that's been in business for hundreds of years. They had just opened up a brand new digital department office downtown. Was really ramping up their mobile offerings, their native app offerings, and I had a chance to join the mobile product management team, kind of at the ground level. And over my 5 years that I was at Walgreens, worked on everything from the mobile website to their native apps to their third-party developer program, and then eventually leading their mobile innovation lab team. So that was where I kind of got much more comfortable in a mobile product role. Stayed at Walgreens for just under 5 years, and really kind of helped get their mobile offerings off the ground and to a point where it was a really important integral part of the overall Walgreens digital business. It was kind of at the time that I was at, in between Metromix and Walgreens, was when I moved from living in the city to out in the suburbs. So after a couple of years, when I was at Walgreens, where I was doing the reverse commute, taking the train down to the city, I decided to look for something that was closer to home here in the suburbs. So there wasn't a ton of options as far as I wanted to stay in digital. I wanted to potentially stay in retail just to capture that knowledge I had gained at Walgreens. So really, it kind of came down to three companies that were in the suburbs that kind of checked those boxes. There was, at the time, McDonald's out in Oak Brook. There was Ace Hardware also out in Oak Brook, and then there was ULTA out in Bolingbrook. And I had quite a few contacts and friends that had started at ULTA prior to that. So decided to make the move to ULTA in late 2015, and have been there since. And I've had a variety of roles at ULTA. I started off being a director running the mobile development team, so the teams that built our customer facing applications as well as our store associate apps. Then moved into a role helping to found our digital innovation team. Was in that role until January of this year, where I got asked to move into a senior director role, leading up overall digital experience and product management for ULTA. So I guess it's like about 20 years after graduation, which is nuts to me to say that. A lot of zigs and zags, both getting out of college and then kind of in the working world and different places. So I think my point being, don't worry, as you get into college and as you get out of college, if things, don't always go as planned or you're not sure directionally. I think it's very rare that someone goes into college with a direct plan of, I want to do this, and then they come out of college doing exactly that, and they do that, for the next 20 years of their working life. So, feel free to roll with the punches and move with the zigs and zags. And I think it's a natural thing that many go through over the course of their college and professional career time. So that's kind of my journey thus far. Next, I want to talk a bit about kind of the concept of mobile apps and really just not just being developers that are involved with that. So what I'm kind of going to do is I'm going to talk through a bunch of different teams that work on the ULTA mobile apps and really talk through the role they play and kind of showcase a little bit of different types of roles that individuals can actually hope to kind of work within and still be a part of a technical or development centric organization, if that makes sense. So one of our key kind of stakeholders or team members, if you will, within the mobile app world is user experience. So this is the team that really focuses on what the guest experience should be when they interact with one of our digital products. You can see here, we had a whiteboarding session. This is back a couple of years ago when we were physically in the office. We were going through an exercise of redesigning the mobile app homepage. So we had a bunch of different teams that were involved, and we had all these big whiteboards across the room, and really we're talking through what was important to our ULTA guests, what were things we wanted to change in the mobile app homepage experience, and collectively kind of drove towards a vision of what that revamp would look like. So really user experience is a key role that not only works on kind of some of the visual mock-ups and wireframes of an experience, but also has a keen focus on user research. So whether that's talking with ULTA guests, looking at industry trends, paying attention to what's happening out there in the marketplace. It's kind of a combination of both direct action with the visual elements, but also being kind of the voice of our customers. So definitely user experience and kind of a little bit more of a creative role is definitely a key area of involvement with the mobile app teams. This quickly just kind of talks through, even from just a user experience side, all the different areas of kind of where the UX team plays a role. So everything from helping to discover and define our digital, discover and define our digital offerings. That could be through journey mapping, customer research, industry research, A/B testing, to actually getting into concepts and design, to putting actually kind of pen to paper, if you will, and starting to draw out what those experiences could look like. A lot of time, even at a rudimentary design perspective, we'll do A/B testing and user testing to get feedback on, even just from a concept perspective, where we're going, and start to get some leading indicators of what might be best for our guests. And then once we kind of do reach a decision, we document the approach we want to take, and then work closely with the development team to implement that, and the QA team to make sure it's thoroughly tested, and eventually it gets launched and is live into the wild. This kind of just shows that same kind of process train, but also kind of showing where kind of the efforts kind of shift between kind of the business stakeholders to the user experience creative teams, and then eventually over time down to the development team members. So you could see from a business kind of product management user experience perspective, a lot of that is in kind of the first half, whereas then it shifts over to the development team that's actually doing the work. But then at the end there, you kind of see that spike where we're making sure that what is being built is matching up with what the intended experience and requirements were. So definitely something that is a 360 cycle, but this kind of shows the role that the UX team plays in there. And then mentioning competitive analysis, and this is back when we were doing our first version of a virtual makeup try-on feature. So we weren't the first to market with that feature, but we definitely looked at all the different competitors and examples that were out there to see how they conducted the experience, and compared, real life makeup application to virtual application, to really help to get a good understanding of where we would need to have our offering be. And eventually we did launch that to our guests. This is actually kind of just a fuller screenshot, if you will, of that kind of concept exercise we had that I talked about earlier. So you could see, white papers all over the place, some with some cleaner sketches and drawings, other ones that are just pure, chicken scratch, but basically kind of the collective effort we went through to kind of ideate on what the mobile app homepage experience could be. Quality assurance is another important area. Obviously, we want to make sure that what goes out to our guests is functionally working correctly, looks like it's supposed to look, and kind of work is ready for prime time all around. So our quality assurance team members, in some ways, they're kind of a hybrid between, in some sense, a product, team member, and knowing the requirements of what something is supposed to do, but then also knowing enough from a development perspective that they're able to make sure that how things are being built are also proper. So this is just a little visual of kind of, the paradigm that you could go through with the development cycle, as far as, what the customer, the interpretation of what the customer originally asked for, and then what they really needed, and kind of the ebbs and flows that goes through the development process. So, QA, the kind of ultimate question on what they do is, obviously they're focused on, like I said, making sure that the experience is built and is operating as it should. They also make sure that from like I guess you could call it a backward looking perspective, they want to make sure that any new functionality doesn't break existing functionality. So they want to make sure that both the new experience is working as intended, as well as the prior experience is also not impacted by any new development. And you can see, if you look at that visual on the bottom there, it's kind of a little bit of a mind wet melt, but you could see kind of where the difference between what a developer might be seeing and what a QA tester might be seeing, even though it looks to be one and the same at the end. So from a QA team member perspective, so the kind of the natural development cycle is there on the left. So kind of starting with requirements, going through design, building, testing, releasing, and maintaining. In parallel, kind of what the QA team is doing is kind of, when requirements are defined, the QA team is reviewing them. When the design team is building out the visual experience. The QA team is building their test plan and how to test those requirements. So you can see kind of the parallel efforts that are happening between the QA world and kind of the product design development world kind of in parallel, but also then leading into kind of tying together so we can launch things to our guests, when and where we want to. QA wise, there's a number of tools that they use, and I won't go deep into these, but essentially, QA over the course of my time at even just at ULTA, but definitely over the last 10 years has gotten much more, I would call it high powered and automated in nature. So it used to be that everything was manually tested. So data setup was manual, testing was manual. If you needed to test on, say, an iOS, an iPhone and an Android, you had to have the physical devices you were testing with. A lot has changed over even the last 5 years. So automation of data setup, automation even of test script execution. So basically, a testing scenario could be kind of mapped out through click mapping, and then that script could be recorded and automated, and then it could be run time over time, then across a number of different devices that are all in the cloud, where you could basically say, I want to test, the iPhone 12 running iOS 14. I want to test an iPhone 10 using iOS 13, or a Google Pixel 4 running whatever. So it allows us to be much more expansive and broad in our test coverage to make sure that when something goes out there, we have even a higher certainty of the success of its functionality, but also allow the QA team to basically focus a lot more on some of the key user flows, user experiences, things like cart and checkout and order submission, and also still cover those more fringe areas as well. So with that, I know we're about 5 minutes to the end of my workshop. So I'll kind of, just take us back to, my closing thoughts and, the kind of the zigs and zags that exist, in the world. And definitely, I think hopefully all of you are on a great path, with the work you're doing in school, the work you're doing with Novus Club. I think participating in a pitch day like this is awesome. I've looked at some of the kind of just little snippets of the different company ideas that are being pitched today, and definitely I'm very excited to hear more of the pitches later today, and really impressed with the work that all of you are doing. So with that, I'll thank the Novus Club for asking me to participate, and I can open it up for any questions or anything with the couple minutes we have left.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks everyone, the students, for being here as well. I was listening in on the workshop, and I know that, I'm working as a software engineer now. I know that if I even got like a tidbit of what you were saying today about like Jira, Cucumber, and just the entire development cycle, I would have been a lot more prepared to launch a career in that space. And like Joe said, development is way more. There's way more to it besides just programming. And so there's tons of careers there. And I hope that Joe sort of exposed you all to some of those careers that exist there. And so really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
And actually, Josh, it's interesting. Your comment there piqued one thing that I forgot to mention during the call. So obviously, for those of you that are technically inclined and are doing, software development, definitely, obviously, that's a hugely important role on many teams and in many companies, both in Chicago and across the country. So definitely, that's a key area, I think, where we've seen some differentiation within our software development team members, or where some have really excelled or kind of moved up through both development and even digital business organizations, is having that combination of technical acumen, but also, business / kind of creative acumen. Those that have been able to both technically develop, but also speak to business stakeholders, speak to business teams that have been, they've kind of been able to separate them out themselves over the course of time. So definitely having a well-rounded skill set is definitely, I think, hugely important. But obviously, that technical, I like to say, if I could have gone back 20 years, I would have said, hey, I should have majored in computer science and done that. But definitely there's a lot of opportunities both within the kind of pure development world and also in some of those ancillary teams. So definitely there's a lot of opportunities. So
yeah, absolutely. I bet that combo is just killer to have. Yeah, okay. So looks like we've got one question. We can probably take that up. And it says, what is the best way to connect with major companies as a small startup?
Yeah, so there's actually so a couple ways you could do that. So there are, I'm going to post them in the chat. There are a few, I'm just naming a few. There are companies that essentially you have your traditional incubators like an 1871 in Chicago, for example, or Catalyst, where that's more the startup company itself is more in the ideation stage and they're trying to build up their ideas and kind of see what they might have as far as an idea or a company. There are other organizations, Tech Nexus, which is based in the Civic Opera House in Chicago, Iterate, which is a more national company, but one that we work with closely. So basically, with the Iterate.ai example, Iterate, that company, they themselves don't do any sort of incubation, but they have a repository and a huge network of startups that they have awareness of. And so, for example, Iterate is like a strategic partner of ULTA. So ULTA might say, hey, Iterate, we're looking for startups that have something to do with the digital product catalog space, right? And Iterate with them will go out and they'll go through their network of startups that might be either directly in that space or related to it. And they'll do all the pre-screening and basically say, hey, ULTA, we got 5 companies here we think might be a fit for your digital product catalog need. Here's kind of a, one sheeter on each of them. Here's some examples, blah, blah, blah. Here's some Q&A we had with the team. And they'll kind of, in some ways, vet the startups for us, but then bring a bunch of them to ULTA to basically have further conversations with. So we do work at ULTA, we work with a lot of startups, probably as much as we do with well-established companies. So I think that's an example of where companies like an Iterate, where you could be part of a network, but also then get exposure to other companies is definitely a good way. And it's probably in some ways an easier way than like a direct, sort of outreach. But I've had companies, that startups that have just somehow gotten my email contact information or sent me something on LinkedIn, and you never know who's gonna read what and who's gonna respond to it. And a lot of times, it hits a topic that I happened to be thinking of that week, and I'll go ahead and engage that company in further conversations. The question, how can you explain your interactions with other departments? So finance and accounting. So definitely, one of our other key kind of areas, especially as I've moved further up in my role in both Walgreens and ULTA, is our finance and accounting partner. So we do have a finance team within digital. They really helps us with a lot of our, everything from, business case building for a new digital feature to looking at digital sales performance or helping them map out how something might look from like a, positive and negative from a finance standpoint. So there's definitely roles that we have within digital that are also kind of in a more accounting finance area as well. And then I've worked with other team members that are like, for example, our corporate strategy team. We do have like an M&A team that is focused on kind of opportunities from a merger, less on a merger, more from an acquisition standpoint for ULTA, and are looking at, startup evaluations and all that sort of thing. So there's definitely roles within those worlds as well. As far as the last question I'll take from Robin, do you think someone should go to college if school isn't really for them, but they're a great leader? I mean, I think there's definitely, alternative paths to kind of get where you want to go. So, there's the traditional high school to college area flow. There's others that have gone directly into the working world and worked on some sort of idea and built experience that way. Others have gone into, pursuits like the military and then kind of came back around to college. I don't think the flow is any one specific way. Obviously, different companies may or may not have different requirements from like an experience or college degree perspective for different roles. I think in the technology space, it's probably a little bit more different as far as the ability to kind of go in a completely different direction. And in some sense, the leadership acumen, the business acumen, and the idea you might have as a startup company might trump the direct college experience. But it's kind of, in some ways, it's individual by individual, case by case. But I think there are definitely many ways to kind of get there.
Awesome. I know we kept you over, Joe. Thanks so much for taking
no worries. And
questions.
I'll talk to some of you guys later on today in the pitch day. So definitely great. Best of luck to everybody today. Thank you.